The year my daughter forgot to invite me again. I didn't cry. I packed. My name is Evelora Brandt. I am 68 years old. Retired after 42 years of teaching art to children who still believed that color could fix anything. I live alone now in a modest house on the quiet edge of Raleigh. My husband, Warren, has been gone nearly a decade, and my daughter, Coraline Cora, as she likes to be called, has been growing busier ever since. Every December follows the same pattern, the first week. I imagine her voice on the phone, warm and hurried. The second week, I bake something small, just in case. The third week, she remembers to text, "Oh, Mom, things are so crazy this year." And by the fourth, I stop setting an extra plate. That morning, a message blinked on my phone. Family plans. I opened it and saw the usual scroll of cheerful names. Nathan's parents. They're friends from Chapel Hill, a cousin I've never met. Not one line mentioned me. I didn't even bother replying. My finger hovered for a second, then pressed delete. I baked anyway. Old habits have their own gravity. Cinnamon, butter, sugar. Simple things that still obey when you measure them right. I made ginger cookies in the shapes of stars. Some with Mira's name piped in frosting. I wrapped them carefully, tied each box with a red ribbon. They looked too hopeful, sitting on the counter beside an unused address label. By noon, the quiet felt heavier than the smell of spice. I checked my voicemail. One from the pharmacy, one from the church newsletter committee, and one from Cora, shorter than a weather report. "Hey, Mom. Hope you're good. We're off to Nathan's folks again. Big crowd this year. Love you." Then static. I listened twice before deleting it. For years, I had saved her messages, even the rushed ones, like proof that she remembered I existed. This time, I let it vanish. Then I opened the closet, pulled down the suitcase, and laid it on the bed. It still smelled faintly of cedar from the last trip Warren and I never took. I folded sweaters, one by one, not because I planned to leave yet, but because the motion steadied me. When the suitcase was half full, I sat beside it and reached for my planner. The week of Christmas stared up at me, blank boxes waiting for names, times, destinations. I uncapped my pen and wrote, in neat blue ink, "Next year, don't wait for an invitation." Outside, wind moved through the bare trees, rattling the windows just enough to sound like a knock that no one would ever make. That evening, I made tea, carried it to the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I typed Mountain Homes near Asheville, North Carolina into the search bar. Dozens of listings appeared, each thumbnail glowing with soft light and snow. I scrolled slowly, feeling something stir that hadn't moved in years. By the time the kettle cooled, I had bookmarked one cabin with a wooden porch and a view that looked like quiet could live there. 3 days after Christmas, a small box arrived at my doorstep. No note, no card, just my name written in Cora's hurried handwriting. Inside was a lavender candle, half burned, its wick curled and black. The label had peeled slightly on one edge, revealing the mark of another brand underneath. It came in a gift bag I recognized, a silver one with faded snowflakes. I had used that bag the year Mira turned 5, when I wrapped her a stuffed polar bear. I remember because Cora had said, "You always overdo it. Mom, kids don't notice presentation." Apparently, she did. I set the candle on the kitchen table and waited for a call that didn't come until evening. "Did the package arrive?" she asked. Voice bright, strained, the kind she used when multitasking. "It did." "Oh, good." Mira picked it herself. She said quickly, she saw it at Amanda's place and said, "Grandma would love that smell." I turned the candle slightly. The wax was uneven. A small tunnel burned down one side. "That's very sweet of her." "Yeah," Cora said, distracted. "Anyway, we're just so busy right now. Nathan's parents are staying another week, and the company's closing out the quarter. Total chaos. Of course, I said softly. There was a pause. Then her tone shifted to relief. You get it. You always do. I wanted to say that I did not get it. Not anymore. That I didn't understand how a woman could plan entire galas for strangers, but forget a single phone call to her mother on Christmas morning. Instead, I smiled into the receiver. I'm glad you're all right. Yeah. Love you, Mom. Love you too. When the line went quiet, I didn't put the phone down right away. I held it a little longer, waiting for the sound of her voice to come back. The way a song echoes even after it stopped playing. Then I set it on the counter and blew out the candle's flame. The lavender smoke curled up like a ribbon and disappeared before reaching the ceiling. By 8 o'clock, the Christmas lights still hanging around the window felt out of place. Their glow no longer looked warm, just artificial. I unplugged them one by one until the room fell into a soft, honest dark. I sat at the table for a while, the candle between my hands, feeling its weight. It wasn't anger that sat with me. It was clarity, the kind that comes when something small tips the scale, when you finally admit the pattern is not an accident, but a choice. I opened my planner again. The blue ink from the week before looked almost steady. Next year, don't wait for an invitation. This time, I underlined it once. The house hummed in its own quiet rhythm refrigerator, clock, my breath. Nothing else asked for me, and for the first time, that absence felt like an answer. I turned on my laptop. The browser still remembered my last search mountain homes near Asheville. I added 2 words with studio space. New listings appeared, cabins with high windows, spare rooms, detached sheds that could hold a desk or easel. Places where light was allowed to land and stay. I scrolled slowly. One page after another, the lavender scent still faint in the air. Then I marked one photo, a small cabin with a wraparound deck and a sign on the fence that read, Larkspur Hill. The call came the next morning. Just as I was rinsing my coffee cup, Mrs. Brandt. This is Cassandra Vale with Blue Ridge Realty. You sent an inquiry about Larkspur Hill. Her voice was steady and kind professional, without rushing. It startled me to be spoken to gently by someone I hadn't met. Yes, I said. I wasn't sure anyone would answer between holidays. Well, she said with a light laugh, real estate doesn't believe in holidays. I can show you the cabin by video if that works. It's about 20 minutes west of Asheville, near the French Broad Valley. Small, quiet spot. I hesitated. I've never bought anything I haven't seen in person. Understandable. She said, but sometimes the right places find us first. I turned toward the kitchen window. The neighbor's yard was still littered with tinsel and inflatable decorations, sagging from last night's rain. I thought of the candle on my counter, burned unevenly and still faintly scented of lavender. Go ahead, I said. Show me. A few clicks later, the video opened. The screen filled with movement. Cassandra's hand adjusting her phone camera, the view shifting as she stepped onto a wooden porch. This is her, she said, using the kind of affection people reserve for old pets or trusted houses. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, about 2 acres of land, built in 1978, but updated in pieces. The porch floorboards creaked when she walked, a soft protest in each step. The view's the real gem, Cassandra continued, turning the camera outward. Pine trees framed a long stretch of the valley, muted and gray in winter light. That's the French Broad down there. In summer, it turns silver. I leaned closer to the screen. The image shook slightly as she moved, revealing chipped paint on the railing, a rusted nail head, a window that looked a bit crooked. Inside, she showed a narrow hallway, an uneven floorboard near the entry. The kitchen tile was cracked in one corner, the kind of imperfection that told a story rather than hid it. Cassandra laughed softly. You'll see she's no glossy magazine home. More like something someone once loved and didn't quite finish. I said quietly, I've known that feeling. Excuse me. Nothing. I said, keep going. She opened a set of curtains. Light spilled across a wall lined with pale wood. The ceilings are lower than new builds, she said, but the light's honest. Comes in steady all afternoon. Honest light. The phrase lingered. I can send inspection reports, Cassandra said, but I'll be candid, this place isn't perfect. The plumbing's older, the deck railing needs reinforcing, and the previous owner painted over oak trim with white enamel. If you want something polished, this won't be it. I felt the corners of my mouth lift. So it's imperfect. Deeply, she said, almost apologetic. So am I told her. There was a small pause. I could hear her exhale, maybe smiling, then maybe it's a fit. The camera settled again on the view, the valley rolling wide, the hills distant and unbothered. A faint breeze carried through the speaker, catching the chime of something metal, an old wind bell perhaps. How much are they asking, I asked. $210,000, she said. The sellers are retiring, moving to Arizona. They'd like to close quickly. I wrote the number down on a scrap of paper near the sink. The ink bled slightly into the fibers. Would you like to come see it in person, she asked. I looked around my kitchen, the familiar walls, the quiet, the absence of laughter that used to fill it. Then I looked back at the still image on my screen, the crooked porch, the imperfect light. I think, I said slowly, I've already seen what I need to. Cassandra's voice softened. I'll send you the paperwork. Mrs. Brandt. No pressure at all. No pressure. I repeated. That's new. When the call ended, I sat for a long time at the table, the computer screen dimming on its own. The house remained in my mind, not for its flaws, but for how its quiet seemed to recognize mine. The morning after the call, Cassandra sent me the forms. The subject line read simply, Larkspur Hill, offer packet. I made tea and opened the documents one by one, scrolling through words that looked heavier than they sounded contingencies. Disclosures. Escrow. The price was there in clean black ink, $210,000. A sum I could manage if I used the fund Warren and I once called our someday money. That money had waited in an account for years. It was meant for trips we never took. Paris first, then maybe Vancouver when we were older. Cora said she would come along once Mira was in school. Someday, she said, again and again, until someday turned into never. When Cassandra called back, her tone was gentle, like she already knew I'd made up my mind. If you're ready, I can draw the initial offer, she said. I'm ready. I told her, you don't want to think it over. I've been thinking for 68 years. She laughed softly, not out of mockery, but respect. All right then. I'll send the final version by noon. I hung up and dialed my bank. The woman who answered had the same crisp politeness Cora used with her clients. I told her I needed to transfer funds from my retirement account into checking $210,000, plus 10 for closing fees. Will this be for a purchase? Ma'am, she asked. Yes. Would you like to add an authorized party to confirm the transaction? No, I said. Just me. There was a small pause on the line before she said, Understood. I'll process it today. By afternoon, Cassandra called again. The sellers accepted. She said, they'll sign tonight. Congratulations, Evelora. The way she said my name, slow, deliberate, felt like a door quietly closing behind me. 2 days later, I drove into Asheville to sign my portion in person. The bank smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer ink. A young notary slid the folder across the counter, flipping to each sticky note, sign here. And here, initial this page, too. Her nails were painted red with tiny snowflakes. I wondered if her mother still waited for phone calls on holidays. When I reached the line marked buyer's signature, my hand trembled. Not from doubt, just from the weight of finality. I wrote my full name, Evelora Brandt. The ink bled slightly into the paper. The notary smiled. "Congratulations. It's official." I nodded, unable to say thank you because the word felt too small. Outside, the air carried that winter stillness unique to mountain towns, thin, dry, quiet enough to hear your own breath. I stopped at a small diner for soup, still half in disbelief that something I'd done entirely on my own could exist without permission or explanation. By Thursday, the courier arrived at my door. He was young, with tired eyes and a polite half-smile. "Delivery for Ms. Brandt," he said, handing me a thick envelope. I signed for it, and he left without looking up again. Inside was a small brass key on a plain silver ring, and a note from Cassandra, "Welcome home." I sat at the kitchen table holding that key until the tea beside me went cold. There was no one to call, no one to tell, not Cora, not my sister-in-law in Portland, not even the women from the church circle who still assumed I hosted family dinners. I turned the key over once, twice, feeling its ridges against my palm. Then I slipped it into the drawer beside the old cookie cutters and closed it carefully, as if sealing a secret that finally belonged to me. I packed before dawn, while the street was still sleeping. The suitcase I had half filled weeks earlier sat open on the bed. I added the rest sweaters, sketchbook, tea canister, the small photo of Warren taken on our last trip to the coast. I left behind the framed family pictures. They no longer looked like me inside them. The air was sharp when I stepped outside. My breath came out in small, white clouds. The car door creaked the way it always had, a soft protest. I started the engine, the sound echoing too loudly in the quiet street. By the time I reached the edge of Raleigh, the first light was breaking. The radio caught nothing but static and half songs that faded mid-line. I let it play anyway. The noise a kind of company. The highway stretched long and open. Frost clung to the shoulders of the road, glittering like it wanted to be noticed. At a rest stop, I bought coffee from a vending machine that tasted faintly of cardboard. A man in a delivery jacket nodded at me, and I nodded back. Two strangers awake too early, both carrying things that weren't theirs. The drive grew steeper after Greensboro, the horizon slowly rising until the road began to bend. Pine trees thickened along the shoulder. The air changed to crisper, drier, almost expectant. I rolled the window down a crack and let it in. I thought of Cora then, not sharply, just a passing thought, like spotting a billboard for a place you'll never visit again. She hadn't called since the candle. She probably wouldn't notice my house dark through Christmas week. The thought should have hurt more than it did. At a small diner near Marion, I stopped for fuel and a real cup of coffee. The waitress had silver hair pinned up with two pencils. She smiled when she saw me carrying only a paper map. "Headed far?" she asked. "Just west," I said. "Asheville." "Good town," she said, refilling my cup without asking. "You visiting or staying?" I hesitated, then said, "Something in between." She laughed softly. "That's what most of us said when we first came through. When I left," she called after me, "Drive safe, sweetheart. Mountains don't like people in a hurry." The road wound tighter after that. I slowed, not because of the warning, but because everything felt fragile, my hands on the wheel, the air between breaths. The fact that I was actually doing this. By early afternoon, I saw the sign, "Welcome to Asheville Elevation, 2,134 feet. The number seemed impossibly small for how far I felt from everything behind me. Snow threatened in the clouds. but hadn't yet fallen. The directions Cassandra sent were simple: follow the ridge road until it narrows, turn left at the mailbox painted blue, continue to the end. When the trees finally parted, the cabin appeared like it had been waiting wood darkened with age. Roofline soft against the sky. I parked beside the porch, turned off the engine, and listened. The quiet wasn't empty. It was layered wind through pine, the slow drip of melting frost, the distant hum of something alive. I took the key from my pocket. It was cold and heavier than I remembered. The lock turned cleanly. One click, no resistance. Inside smelled of cedar and dust. A place untouched, but not unloved. I set the suitcase down, leaned against the wall, and closed my eyes. The silence wrapped around me, not as punishment, but as proof that I had finally arrived somewhere no one expected me to be. The first morning in the cabin began with silence that felt almost deliberate, as if the house was waiting to see how I'd treat it. I made coffee with the small travel pot I'd brought, its sound oddly comforting against the stillness. The water boiled unevenly, hissing, sputtering, like a reminder that even simple things could take effort at this altitude. I started with the kitchen. The cabinets were coated in a thin film of neglect. I scrubbed until my wrists ached, wiping away the soft gray layer that dulled the wood's grain. Underneath, it gleamed in streaks, patchy but alive. When Cassandra called to check in, I was on my knees with a bucket. "How's she treating you so far?" she asked. "Like she's not sure I'll stay," I said, wringing out the rag. Cassandra laughed softly. "Houses learn their owners. You'll both adjust." I could hear papers shuffling on her end. "Any problems so far?" "Leaks, drafts, only the kind I brought with me," I said. "I'll manage." She hesitated. "All right, just remember you don't have to rush. Let it become yours, one thing at a time." After we hung up, I leaned back against the counter and looked around. The walls were dull white, streaked from years of smoke and humidity. I pulled a paint sample from my bag, a shade called warm ochre. Warren had once said that color made every room look honest. I pried open the can and began rolling the paint in broad strokes. The color glowed softly under the light from the small window above the sink. And I felt something steady return to my chest. By midday, I'd covered most of the kitchen. My hands shook from fatigue, but the kind that came with purpose. I ate lunch, standing bread, soup from a tin, and an apple I'd brought from Raleigh. There was no dining table yet, just a folding chair near the hearth. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, the sound low and unhurried. I kept the back door cracked open so I could hear it. Each gust sounded different, like the trees were speaking in turns. That night, I placed an order online for new cabinet knobs from a small craft store in Vermont. The woman who ran it, Marjorie, replied within an hour. "Your choice is a popular one," she wrote. "Brushed brass, simple, steady, ships in 3 days." I typed back, "Perfect. That's what I need." It was late when I noticed how the paint caught the lamplight differently, now less sterile, more forgiving. I washed the brushes in the sink, dried them on a towel, and stood back. The walls no longer looked like a place abandoned. They looked like somewhere someone had decided to begin again. Before turning in, I unpacked the last thing I had brought from home, an empty wooden frame. It had hung in the hallway for years, waiting for a photo I never chose. Cora once teased me about it. "Mom, people will think you forgot to fill it." I didn't forget. I'd said, "I just haven't decided what deserves it." Now, I held it up above the fireplace. The nail was already there, faintly rusted, almost like the wall had been saving a space for it. When I stepped back, the frame caught the light from the lamp, creating a faint reflection that shimmered in the glass. It didn't look empty anymore, it looked expectant. I sat in the folding chair again, bowl in hand, the soup gone lukewarm. The night outside was dark but not lonely. The wind moved softer now, brushing against the cabin like a breath. I let it fill the spaces I hadn't yet touched. Somewhere beyond the trees, the ridge held the first hint of dawn. The light crept in slow, finding the frame, landing inside it like it had been waiting too. By the third evening, I had finished unpacking everything that mattered and nothing that didn't. The boxes marked kitchen and bedroom were empty, but the one labeled memories stayed sealed under the desk. I wasn't ready to decide what deserved to follow me here. The house had begun to breathe with me, wood settling after dark, wind crossing the chimney like a low sigh. I made tea, then sat in the chair by the window, the one I'd placed where the afternoon light lingered the longest. The lamp's glow touched the frame above the hearth, turning the bare glass a soft gold. For the first time in years, the quiet felt earned, not forced. I looked down at my phone. The lock screen still showed the same picture it had for a decade, Cora and me at the county fair, her arm hooked through mine, both of us laughing at something I can no longer remember. The photo had aged better than we had. I hadn't posted anything online in months, maybe longer. My account had turned into a digital attic: birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners that grew fewer each year. The last post was a photo of Mira holding a gingerbread house, captioned, "Proud Grandma Moment." The comments were kind but distant, mostly from people I hadn't seen in years. I opened the app out of habit, then almost closed it again, but the room was too quiet, and my tea had gone cold. The chair sat beneath the window, facing the soft spill of snow. The lamp made a circle of light that reached just far enough to touch the frame on the wall. I took my phone and lifted it slightly, framing the image: chair, lamp, window, snow, simple, still, honest. The camera clicked once. I stared at the photo for a long time. There was no face in it, no holiday, no apology, just space, held and kept. I typed a caption, "My gift to myself this year. I think I earned it." Then, almost without thinking, I posted it. A small notification flashed: shared successfully. I set the phone face down on the table and felt my chest tighten. Not from regret, but from the strange weight of doing something that needed no approval. The house creaked softly in the wind. Somewhere outside, an owl called once, short and low. When the phone buzzed a few minutes later, I didn't look. I muted the notifications, turned the lamp off, and sat in the dark until my eyes adjusted. The window reflected my outline faintly, half shadow, half light. I remembered what Cora once said at a family dinner years ago. She was scrolling her phone between courses, barely listening to me talk about one of my students. "Mom," she'd said with a laugh, "you don't get social media. It's not for people who don't want attention." She was right. In her way, it wasn't about attention. It was about proof, tiny fragments of existence floating for someone to find. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out toward the trees. Snow had started to fall again, soft as breath, covering the porch rail in a thin white line. I switched the phone off completely and placed it on the counter beside the empty mug. The silence deepened, full and undemanding. When I went to bed, the frame above the fireplace still caught the faint light from the moon. In its glass reflection, the room looked whole, as if someone had filled it with presence instead of absence. The phone began buzzing before I'd even finished my coffee. It rattled once, paused, then again in a rhythm that felt too insistent to ignore. I turned it over 5 missed calls. 3 from Cora, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. Below them, a text waited. "Wow. Gorgeous house. We're heading up this weekend to check it out. Can't wait to see it." No greeting, no question, just assumption, bright and thoughtless. I stared at the words for a long time, watching the little gray reed dot blink beside them. My reflection hovered faintly on the black glass. I typed back, "House is not available. I'll be away." I read it once, then pressed send. The reply came less than a minute later. "Oh, maybe next weekend," then I didn't answer. I set the phone face down on the counter and felt my heartbeat steady. Slow and deliberate, like the house itself was exhaling with me. The air smelled faintly of paint and pine smoke. I poured another cup of coffee and let the quiet fill the spaces her voice once occupied. By noon, I had made up my mind to change the locks. The decision came without ceremony, just a small, clean thought that refused to leave. I found the business card Cassandra had tucked into my closing packet, Theo Marsh. Locksmith licensed, bonded, discreet. When I called, a calm male voice answered on the second ring. "Marsh here, Mr. Marsh. This is Evelora Brandt up on Larkspur Hill. I'd like to replace a few locks. Old brass or newer steel?" he asked. "Old, I think. They rattle when the wind hits." "Then let's make sure you can sleep through a storm." "I can be there around 4. He arrived just as the light started to turn gold. A tall man in a dark work jacket dusted with saw shavings. His truck door creaked as he shut it. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "Mind if I take a look?" "Go ahead." He moved with quiet efficiency, inspecting each door, tapping the frames with his knuckles. "You've got good bones here," he said. "Just a bit tired hardware. Nothing time and patience can't fix. I've got time." I said, "Patience depends on the day." That made him smile faintly. "Understandable." He worked without asking unnecessary questions. The sound of his drill filled the house steady, controlled, oddly comforting. Between steps, he hummed softly. A tune I didn't recognize but that seemed older than either of us. When he finished, he handed me 2 new keys, identical and unmarked. "Everything's rekeyed, reinforced strike plates, internal latch on the back door. You'll be safe here." "I appreciate that," I said. He tested one door again, leaning his weight into it until it caught solidly. "There," he said with quiet pride. "This place will hold." He packed his tools and wiped his hands on a rag. Before leaving, he hesitated by the porch. "I've done work for plenty of cabins up here, but not many feel like they belong to their owner yet. Yours does." I didn't know what to say to that, so I nodded. "Thank you." After he drove away, I locked the new doors one by one, listening to the crisp, final clicks. Each sound landed with the same calm weight as my breath. Outside, the trees moved together, a soft wave of dark green against the last light of day. I stood at the window until the shadows thickened, then drew the curtains and turned on the lamp. The house was completely silent again, but this time, it was a silence I had chosen. It started with a phone call to Cassandra. I told her I wanted to thank her properly for helping me find the cabin. "You don't have to do that," she said, laughing. "You're the one who bought it." "Still," I said, "I'd like to make dinner. Nothing formal, just food and company." She hesitated, then said, "You'll regret inviting a realtor. We always show up early and talk too much." "Good," I said. I could use both. I called 2 retired teachers I'd met through the library's volunteer program, Marilyn and Etta, both widowed. Both women who understood the silence that follows a long marriage. And Carol, my nearest neighbor down the hill, who waved every morning as she drove her mail truck to town. Potluck, Carol suggested when I told her, "I'll bring something warm. It's too cold for salads." "Perfect," I said. "Anything that fills the table." By late afternoon, the cabin smelled like garlic and rosemary. I set out the dishes I'd collected from thrift stores, no 2 alike, each with its own small crack or chip. The mismatched pieces suited the room. Nothing in it pretended to match. Cassandra arrived first, carrying a bottle of red wine and a box of pastries. "I didn't know what goes with whatever you're cooking," she said. "Everything goes with starting over." I told her. She laughed and set the bottle down. "You're braver than most of my clients. They usually want houses that come with guarantees." I shook my head. Guarantees make people lazy. Imperfection makes them pay attention. Marilyn and Etta came next, their cheeks pink from the cold. They brought a casserole wrapped in a towel. "It's heavy," Marilyn said. "So if it's awful, at least you'll be full." The last to arrive was Carol, balancing a slow cooker in both hands. "Chicken stew," she said, setting it down. "Feeds 6 if we don't mind seconds." "We'll mind," I said, smiling, "and still take seconds." We ate crowded around the small table, the air filled with the clatter of spoons and the kind of laughter that rises naturally when no one feels they need to perform. Cassandra told a story about her first sale, a collapsing farmhouse she'd convinced a sculptor to buy. Marilyn and Etta compared teaching nightmares, children who ate glue or refused to draw with anything but black crayons. Carol interrupted only to pour more wine or slide another plate of bread toward someone else. At one point, Cassandra leaned back and said, "You've done wonders with this place. It already feels lived in." I looked around at the chipped plates, the soft light, the uneven paint that still showed the brush strokes I'd left on the kitchen wall. "It feels honest," I said. "That's rare," she murmured. Later, when the plates were mostly empty, Carol reached across the table, her bracelets chiming. "I don't mean to sound sentimental," she said, "but this feels more like family than family ever did." The words settled over the table like a blanket. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Marilyn raised her glass. "To family that shows up." We all followed. When the laughter started again, it was softer, steady, the kind that hummed beneath the noise. After everyone left, I stood by the door holding the half-empty bottle of wine. The table still smelled of garlic and wax from the candle that had burned low. I didn't clean up right away. I let the clutter stay the crumbs, the smudged glasses, the trace of warmth that lingered in the room. The silence that followed was not the kind that presses down. It was the kind that breathes with you, that waits, that belongs. I went to the Asheville branch that morning to finalize the property transfer paperwork. It was a simple errand routine, but I dressed as if it were something formal, a pressed blouse, the pearl earrings Warren had given me on our 25th anniversary. Some occasions deserve quiet armor. The lobby smelled faintly of pine cleaner and warm printer ink. I took a number and sat with my folder balanced on my knees. A few minutes later, I heard a familiar voice at the counter. "Is there someone I can talk to about adding a beneficiary to an existing account I didn't need to look up?" The teller said something polite. Then came Cora's reply, faster, impatient, the way she always spoke when she wanted something handled immediately. When I finally turned, she was standing only a few steps away, scarf loose around her neck, cheeks flushed from the cold. Her surprise froze us both. "Mom," she said, half whisper, half exhale. "I didn't know you were here. I have an appointment." I said, "Oh," she hesitated. "Well, maybe it's good timing. We need to talk." I nodded once. "Then let's talk." We met across the street at a small coffee shop. She ordered a latte, extra foam. I asked for tea. We sat by the window, the glass fogging slightly between us. She didn't waste time. "You bought a mountain house." "Yes." "And you didn't tell anyone?" "No." She stared at me, eyes bright with something I couldn't quite name shock. Irritation, maybe embarrassment. I saw the post online. Nathan showed me. "Everyone did. Then I suppose everyone knows," I said. Her voice sharpened. "Do you have any idea how that looked? You posting that without a word? People thought we'd... She stopped. It made me look awful. Mom? I stirred my tea, letting the spoon tap the cup once. I didn't post it to make you look anything. Then why? Because I wanted to... She leaned forward. You could have invited us. Mira would have loved to see it. I met her eyes. I wasn't invited to Christmas. She blinked. That's not fair. We thought you were busy with friends. The church ladies. You didn't ask. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, just accurate. She looked down at her hands. It's a big house for one person, she said finally. You didn't even offer to share it. I didn't buy it for sharing. I bought it with my name, not your needs. Her mouth opened, then closed. The barista called someone's order. Steam hissed behind the counter. Cora's voice softened, almost pleading. I just wish you'd told me. I've told you many things. I said quietly. You don't hear the ones that don't include you. She drew in a long breath, adjusting her scarf like she needed something to do with her hands. I don't know what's happening to you, Mom. I do. I said. I stopped waiting. For a moment, she looked like the girl I used to braid hair for, before she learned how to fill silence with blame. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, relief washing across her face like an exit. I have to go, she said. We'll figure this out later. There's nothing to figure out. She left without finishing her drink. I stayed until the tea turned cold. The cup ring staining the napkin beneath it, outside. The wind picked up, scattering a few dry leaves across the sidewalk. I pulled on my coat and stepped into the chill. Back in the car, I rested my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the hum of the engine before starting it. The house key was in my pocket, small and solid. By the time I reached the ridge road, the air had shifted the kind of cold that announced snow. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. The silence between us had already said enough. The letter came on a Thursday morning, tucked neatly inside a cream-colored envelope with no return address. The handwriting wasn't Cora's too even, too careful. I already knew it was Nathan before I opened it. The paper was heavy, the kind used for formal invitations, which felt fitting considering how politely it tried to invade. Dear Mrs. Brandt, due to the upcoming birth of our child and certain temporary housing constraints, we would appreciate the opportunity to reside for a short period at your mountain property. As you are currently not utilizing the full space, this arrangement would provide great comfort to the family. We are, of course, prepared to contribute to utilities during our stay. Warm regards, Nathan Marin. No warmth, no sincerity, not even a pretense of gratitude. I read it twice, slower the second time. The words "your mountain property" caught me so cleanly detached, as if the house were a facility, not a choice, as if my quiet life were a guest house waiting for their arrival. I set the letter on the counter, beside the teapot, still warm from breakfast. I tried to imagine the conversation that had led to it. Cora pacing the kitchen, saying, "Just write her something formal. She responds better to structure." The thought made me laugh once, short and dry. I folded the letter neatly, pressing the crease down with my thumb, then carried it to the fireplace. The ashes from last night's fire were still faintly warm. I placed the letter on top, struck a match, and watched the flame catch the corner. The paper curled inward first, darkening along the edges, then folded in on itself, as if trying to keep its own secret. The handwriting vanished line by line until only the signature remained, glowing briefly before crumbling to black dust. It ended without noise, as goodbyes should. When the flame went out, I brushed the ashes once with the poker, spreading them thin. The phone rang a few minutes later. Cassandra's name lit up the screen. "Morning, Evelora," she said. "Just checking in. I had someone ask if you were considering renting the property. I told them I doubted it, but I thought I'd confirm." I smiled faintly. You were right to doubt it. I figured. She said, beautiful house like that, though no shortage of interest. It's not for rent, I said, or for visitors. Her tone softened. Understood. I'll note that on the file. Cassandra, I added, if someone wanted to make trouble about ownership or access, do you know a lawyer who handles property rights? Someone quiet but firm. She paused, picking up the shift in my voice. Yes. I can send you a few names. No questions asked. Thank you. Do I want to know what's happening? She asked gently. No. I said, but I'll let you know when it's over. When we hung up, I poured another cup of tea and carried it to the window. Outside, the air was motionless, the kind of stillness that waits for weather to decide what it wants to be. I sat in the chair by the window, the one where I'd taken that photo weeks ago. The reflection in the glass showed me the empty frame above the fireplace, catching a faint flicker from the cooling ashes. For a moment, the light trembled there, then faded. I sipped my tea and let the taste of smoke linger just long enough to remind me what it meant to burn something completely, to let it disappear without ceremony, without explanation. Cassandra texted me the next morning. Marin Holt Asheville. Smart, discreet, no drama. Tell her I sent you. I called before noon. A calm voice answered, low and measured. Marin Holt speaking. This is Evelora Brandt, I said. Cassandra Vale suggested I reach out. I need to discuss property rights and possibly a will update. There was a pause, then the sound of a pen clicking. Of course. Are you available this afternoon? I am. Her office sat on the second floor of an old brick building near Pack Square. The sign outside was small, etched metal, nothing fancy. Inside, the waiting room held 2 chairs, a plant, and silence that didn't feel rehearsed. When Marin opened the door, I saw a woman in her 50s, hair pulled back neatly, sleeves rolled up. She looked like someone who handled problems instead of performing empathy about them. Mrs. Brandt, she said, shaking my hand. Please, come in. Her desk was covered in files stacked by precision. Not chaos, she gestured for me to sit. Cassandra mentioned you bought property on Larkspur Hill. Yes. Beautiful area, she said. What kind of concerns are we addressing? Title, estate, or boundaries? All of them, I said, and some that aren't written down. She nodded slowly. Start with the property deed. I slid the folder across her desk, bought it under my name alone, paid in full. My daughter and her husband have expressed interest. I want to make sure their interest ends at curiosity. Marin opened the file and skimmed the paperwork quickly. Cash purchase, she noted. That simplifies things. You'll want to record a non-contest clause and a reaffirmed title affidavit. That ensures no one can claim familial entitlement. I'd like that, I said. And I'd like my will updated to reflect the same. Her pen hovered. Do you intend to leave the property to anyone I haven't decided? I said, but not to them. Her eyes flicked up. Neutral, but understanding. You can designate it to a trust or a charity later. For now, we'll secure it under your name, with explicit wording, sole owner, no contingent beneficiaries. She started typing, the rhythm steady and unbothered. Any valuables or accounts to be listed? Just this house, I said. Everything else is ordinary. Ordinary, she repeated, almost smiling. That's my favorite kind of asset. We worked through details, the property description, the recording number, the clause about no shared access. I signed where she pointed, her language efficient but kind. When we finished, she slid the pen back into its holder. This document will be filed within 48 hours. Once it's recorded, the deed is sealed under your authority. No one can revise it without your signature or a court order. I nodded, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Marin looked at me for a moment before saying quietly, "You've done something most people never do, claimed peace while you can still protect it." I met her gaze. "I've learned peace doesn't keep itself." "True," she said. "It likes paperwork." That made us both laugh, short and real. She slid one more folder toward me. "This is the updated will. You can revise it any time, but as it stands, no contest, no confusion." I read the words slowly. They didn't sound cold. They sounded complete. I signed again. When I stood, she offered her hand once more. "You've built a boundary, not a wall. There's a difference." "I know," I said, "but right now I need both." Outside. The sky was pale with thin light. I walked to the car. The envelope tucked beneath my arm. The streets buzzed faintly with noon traffic. Ordinary life moving forward. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing it. I was standing exactly where I meant to be. The knock came just after dusk, hard and hurried. The kind that doesn't wait to be welcome. I was in the kitchen rinsing a cup when I heard it 3 sharp strikes. A pause, then the sound of the doorknob turning once, twice. The new keypad clicked solidly in protest. Through the window above the sink, headlights glared across the snow, slicing through the dark. A car engine idled low, then stopped. I dried my hands slowly and walked to the door. Outside, Cora stood on the porch, her scarf half undone, breath clouding the cold air. "You changed the locks," she said, not as a question, but an accusation. "I did," I answered. "I drove 3 hours." "Mom," her voice trembled from the cold or from the edge she'd been standing on for years. "I just wanted to talk. You could have called. You don't answer anymore." I opened the door halfway, enough for the warmth from inside to meet the sharp air between us. "Because you only call when you've already decided what I should say." "That's not fair." She stepped closer. "You've been impossible to reach. I didn't even know if you were all right. I'm fine. That's not the point." She looked past me into the living room, her eyes catching on the lamp, the frame above the fireplace, the folded blanket on the chair. "You'd keep your daughter outside." I met her gaze, calm and even, until she remembers how to knock. Her face tightened, disbelief sliding into anger. "I'm standing here. Aren't I standing isn't the same as knocking." "Cora," she exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. "You're being dramatic. You could have told me you wanted space. I would have understood." "You never understand space," I said quietly. "You fill it with yourself until no one else fits." "That's not true." I let the silence answer for me. The wind lifted a few flakes from the railing, scattering them like punctuation. She tried again, softer this time. "Nathan's been worried. And Mira keeps asking when she can visit. She drew you a picture." "I know," I said. "She sent it last month." Cora blinked. "You wrote her back." "Yes." "She didn't tell me. She doesn't tell you everything." For a moment, her expression faltered, the defensive tilt of her chin lowering, the anger giving way to something smaller. "I just thought," she trailed off, shaking her head. "I thought maybe this house could be a chance to start over." "This house isn't for starting over," I said. "It's for stopping what should have ended long ago." She stared at me, color rising in her cheeks. "You make it sound like I ruined everything." I opened the door another inch, not as invitation, but clarity. "You didn't ruin everything. Cora, you just stopped seeing me as part of it." She flinched, then forced a brittle laugh. "You really think cutting us out will make you happy?" "I think it might let me breathe." The words hung between us like visible air. Behind her, the snow began again, light but steady, softening the outlines of her car. She looked over her shoulder, maybe to check how quickly the road would fade if she stayed too long. "I don't know how to fix this," she said finally. "Neither do I," I admitted. But locking the door was a start. Her eyes shimmered once before she looked away. "You've changed. Mom, I've stopped apologizing." She nodded as if that were an answer, though not the one she wanted. "Mira's birthday is in 2 weeks," she said quietly. "I'll tell her you said hello. Do that." She turned, boots crunching against the snow, her breath rising in uneven clouds. The car engine coughed to life, then settled into a low hum. Headlights swept briefly across the porch before disappearing down the hill. I closed the door, sliding the new bolt into place. The click sounded final, but not cruel. Inside, the quiet held. I stood there for a long time, hand on the frame, feeling the faint tremor where warmth met cold wood. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I only listened until her engine faded completely, leaving nothing but the slow hush of falling snow. The next morning, the house felt smaller, not emptier, just quieter in a way that drew attention to every sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the shift of the wind against the eaves, the faint echo of Cora's voice still caught somewhere between the hallway and the door. I moved slowly through the kitchen, wiping the counter, rinsing dishes that didn't need cleaning. My body had learned to move for company, and now there was none. Each gesture felt deliberate, an act of remembering what my own rhythm sounded like. When I opened the cupboard for a cloth, something thin slid out and fluttered to the floor. I bent to pick it up. It was an old page torn from a coloring pad. Crayon, lines fading, corners bent. A child's drawing a small house with a crooked chimney. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. Mira's name was written in large, unsteady letters across the bottom. I recognized the drawing immediately. She had made it 3 Christmases ago, the last one I spent at their house. Cora had helped her wrap it, folding it carefully into the pages of one of my cookbooks so it won't get bent. I must have left it there when I packed. I ran my thumb over the smudged red roof, remembering the way Mira's tongue had poked from the corner of her mouth while she colored. "That's you, Grandma," she'd said proudly. "You're in the middle because you make everyone stick together." I had laughed then, thinking it was just a sweet thing a 6-year-old would say. But now, holding it in my kitchen, the words hurt and healed in the same breath. The drawing was fragile, but it hadn't torn. I smoothed it against the counter and set it beside my tea. That afternoon, Cassandra called to check in. "I was going to see if you'd come by for coffee," she said. "You sound tired." "I'm fine," I said, though my voice didn't quite match the word. "Still thinking about your daughter?" "Yes, she came by, didn't she?" I didn't answer right away. She tried the door. I said finally. Cassandra exhaled softly. "That kind of trying doesn't count." "No," I said. "It doesn't. She'll come around when she runs out of reasons not to." "Maybe," I said, "but this house isn't waiting for her to—" We talked for another minute or two about the weather, about her son's new job before saying goodbye. When I hung up, the room felt heavier again, as if the call had stirred old dust from the corners. I made soup for dinner, ate half of it, and set the rest aside. My appetite wasn't gone, just gentler. After washing the bowl, I wandered into the living room. The frame above the fireplace caught the last of the afternoon light, still empty, still waiting. I picked up the drawing from the table and held it to the glass. It fit almost perfectly, Mira's crooked sun shining in the top corner, the little stick figures smiling up at a house not so different from this one. I found a strip of tape and pressed the picture gently to the inside of the frame. The paper crinkled slightly, then settled, stepping back. I looked at it for a long time. The colors had faded, but the shapes were clear enough to remember who they once were. Some memories. I whispered, "Don't need an apology to be kind." The sound of my own voice startled me a little. It had been hours since I'd spoken out loud. Outside, the snow had stopped. The world beyond the window looked pale and quiet. the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when everything has said what it needed to and nothing more. I sat in the chair by the window, letting the light fade from gold to gray. The drawing glowed faintly above the hearth. Small but steady, a child's proof that once, for a moment, we had all belonged in the same picture. When darkness finally settled, I didn't turn on the lamp. I just sat there, listening to the house breathe, and let the silence stretch until it began to feel like something I could live with. By the end of January, the papers were ready. Marin called to say everything had been finalized, deed reaffirmed, will updated, all clauses filed and recorded. "Would you prefer to sign here or at your property?" she asked. "Here," I said. "I'd rather see it done where it began." Her office looked exactly as it had the first time, tidy, unhurried. Sunlight filtered through the same pale curtains. A mug of coffee sat beside the folder she'd prepared. Marin gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Everything's in order," she said. "All that remains are your initials on the addendums and a final signature on the affidavit." I sat, taking the pen she offered. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," she said. "Most of what people think is complicated comes from not deciding." I smiled faintly. "I suppose I've done my share of avoiding decisions." She shook her head. "No, you've delayed. Which is different. Delay can still end in courage." The folder contained only a few pages, clean lines of text that settled like full stops at the end of long sentences. I read each word carefully. No contest, no transfer, no shared access without written consent. It was not a declaration of anger. It was a record of choice. When I reached the last line, Marin turned her pen upright. "Ready." Yes, I signed Evelora Brandt one final time, the ink sinking smoothly into paper. Marin glanced over it once, then nodded. "It's done." The room felt lighter, as if something unspoken had finally exhaled. She leaned back. "Would you like copies mailed or delivered by hand? I'll take them myself," I said. "I don't trust paper to travel more than I do." "That's fair." She closed the folder, securing it with a thin leather strap. "You've built something strong here, legally and otherwise." "It's not strength," I said. "It's quiet." She gave a small smile. Quiet can be the loudest kind of strength. When I returned to Larkspur Hill, the snow had already started thin flakes drifting like small hesitations before they committed to falling. Cassandra's car was parked near the porch. She waved as I pulled in, holding 2 paper cups. "You're hard to track down," she said. "I figured I'd bring the coffee to you this time." "Good timing," I said. I just finished signing away my old anxieties. "Congratulations." She handed me one of the cups. "You've officially joined the club of women who know exactly what they own." I laughed softly. "It's a small club, exclusive, too," she said. We went inside, shaking off snow at the threshold. The air smelled faintly of pine and the last fire I'd built the night before. Cassandra looked around. "You've made it feel warmer somehow. The place suits you." I sat at the table and set the folder beside my cup. "It's strange," I said. "There's nothing new here. But it feels like something began today." "That's how closure works," she said, pulling off her gloves. "It's not the end of anything. It's just the point where you stop losing pieces of yourself to things you can't fix." I nodded, tracing the rim of my cup with my finger. "It's not revenge," I said quietly. "It's closure you can live in." Cassandra looked at me for a moment, then smiled. "That sounds like peace." "Maybe it is," I said. "Or maybe it's just the absence of noise." Outside, the snowfall grew heavier, steady and rhythmic against the window. The trees blurred into soft outlines. Cassandra stood and walked to the door. "I'll let you enjoy your snow," she said, Some moments shouldn't have company. Thank you for everything. She waved a gloved hand. Just keep the coffee habit. It makes everything legal feel lighter. When she left, I turned off the light above the sink and stood by the window. The snow came down in even layers, covering the road, the porch, the footprints that had marked her path. I watched until the shapes outside softened, the world folding itself into white silence. The folder sat on the table behind me. Signed, sealed, final. I didn't touch it. I just let the quiet settle again, a slow, certain peace filling the house like something earned, not given. By the last Saturday of January, the snow had thinned to a soft crust over the hill. The sky held that pale, forgiving light that comes just before dusk. I set the table early, mismatched plates, cloth napkins from a thrift shop, and a small vase of pine branches I'd clipped from near the porch. The house smelled faintly of garlic and rosemary again. Carol was the first to arrive, her laughter audible before her knock. "You're spoiling us, Evelora," she said, handing me a casserole that steamed through the foil. "It's just food," I said. "You all bring more than you take, only because you keep feeding us." A few minutes later, Cassandra came in with 2 bottles of wine and a look of mild triumph. I found the local stuff, the labels crooked, but the man at the shop swore it was drinkable. Behind her came Marilyn and Etta, the retired teachers, wrapped in scarves and conversation that never seemed to end. They were still laughing about a grocery store mix-up. Apparently, one of them had mistaken salt for sugar in a batch of muffins. By the time we sat down, the table was full. Chicken stew, roasted vegetables, bread that Carol insisted wasn't burned. I poured the wine, and we began to eat, the rhythm of forks and spoons blending with the easy hum of voices. Cassandra leaned back in her chair. "I still can't believe you did all this alone. Most people would have called a contractor." "I needed something to hold that wasn't paper," I said. Marilyn nodded. "We all need something solid to work against. That's how people stay upright." Carol grinned. "I just bake. When things fall apart, I make dough until it listens." The laughter came easily, the kind that rose and fell like a shared breath. At one point, Etta reached for her glass, her voice soft. "You ever think about them?" The room quieted a little, though no one looked directly at me. "Sometimes," I said. Carol tilted her head. "Do you miss them?" I looked down at my plate, tracing the rim with my fingertip. "You can't miss something that never made space for you." The words came out calm. Not bitter, just true. No one tried to fill the silence that followed. Cassandra reached for the wine and poured a little more into each glass. "To space." "Then," she said finally, "the kind you make for yourself." Marilyn lifted her glass. "And to people who actually fit inside it." We all raised ours. The toast was quiet, almost reverent. Later, after dessert, a crooked apple tart. Carol insisted was rustic, not failed. Cassandra started humming a tune under her breath. Etta recognized it first. "Oh, I know that one," she said. "It's older than all of us." Marilyn clapped once. "Then we should absolutely ruin it together." And we did. The melody wandered off key within seconds. But no one cared. Carol laughed so hard she had to sit down halfway through the chorus. Even Cassandra, usually measured, lost the tune entirely by the second verse. When the song ended, we stayed in that small pocket of soundless warmth, the kind that follows joy rather than precedes it. As they began to gather coats and leftovers, Etta touched my shoulder. "You've built something here," she said. "Not just a home, a place that knows your name when you walk in." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. After they left, I stood at the window watching the taillights curve down the hill. The snow had begun again, faint as breath. The road below vanished in moments, leaving only the glow from the porch lamp steady. Gold. Certain. I turned back toward the table. The glasses were half full, the plates still warm. I didn't clean right away. I let the scene stay exactly as it was. Proof that life could sound like this: voices, laughter, and no edges sharp enough to draw blood. The clock ticked softly. I poured myself a last half cup of wine and sat at the table alone. Though it didn't feel like loneliness anymore, the lamp flickered once, then steadied. The frame above the fireplace caught the reflection, the child's drawing glowing faintly in the light. Outside, the snow fell thicker. Inside, everything held. By early March, the snow began to melt in long, reluctant streaks along the ridge. The pines outside the cabin were shedding their frost, the branches dark and wet from the thaw. The air smelled faintly of earth, again raw, cold, alive. I made coffee and sat at the table with my planner open beside the mug. The pages were mostly clean now, just a few notes about grocery runs, doctor visits, a reminder to call Carol about the spring market. When I turned to December, the week of Christmas waited, as empty as always. I took my pen and wrote one word, neat and certain across the line. Booked. No destinations, no names, just the word. It filled the space exactly as it should. The porch light caught my eye through the window, its brass frame dulled from winter. I put on my coat and stepped outside. The cold, soft but steady. The snow crunched under my boots. The sound delicate and familiar. I carried a cloth with me, the same one I used every few weeks when the lamp gathered dust. The engraving on the plaque beneath it still gleamed faintly. Welcome, not owed. When I first found that phrase in an antique shop months ago, I hadn't known why it settled so deeply. Now, I did. It was the simplest truth I had ever owned. I wiped the brass slowly, tracing the letters with my thumb. Behind me, the door opened a few inches. Carol's voice carried out, bright and teasing. You polishing that thing again, Evelora. It's going to shine like a signal beacon. Maybe that's the point, I said, not turning. She laughed. You coming down for dinner later? I will, I said. Bring the good bread. Not the burnt one. Rude, she said. But there was warmth in it. The door clicked shut again, and her footsteps faded back toward the road. I stayed where I was, watching the sun slide lower through the trees. The light touched everything gently: the railing, the windows, the soft meltwater running down the steps. The house looked the way I felt: worn, but steady. Inside, the clock ticked its small rhythm. The fire crackled low. Not urgent, just enough. I sat again at the table, the planner still open. My handwriting looked different from the first entries I'd made months ago, firmer, without apology. I thought of all the times I had written plans that depended on someone else's permission, trips postponed, calls unanswered, invitations that never came. Now, there was only booked, a word that meant not busy, not unavailable, but claimed. The phone on the counter buzzed, once an unknown number. I didn't reach for it. It stopped after 2 rings. Silence settled easily again. I stood and walked to the window. The ridge beyond the valley caught the last of the light, a thin gold edge against the fading sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for forgiveness, for return, for proof that I still belonged somewhere. The belonging was here, in the way the air warmed slowly against the glass, in the steady glow of the lamp I had polished until it reflected my face. I whispered, almost to the wind, for once, everything's exactly enough. The words didn't echo, they didn't need to. I turned off the kettle, closed the planner, and set it on the shelf near the door. Through the window, the lamp shone softly, its light spilling just far enough to reach the porch steps. The brass plaque caught the glow again, simple, certain, unchanged. Welcome, not owed. I left it shining there, steady against the dusk, and went back inside to let the evening settle around me like a promise already kept.